Okay, everyone, today we're going to talk about one of the defining moments in European history, and not particularly a good one, although there'll be some long-term benefits of it. The Crusades, or as I like to call, a lesson in futility. And as you can see here, happened from the year 1095 to the 1400s. So what we have here is the First Crusade, which kicked off this whole period in 1095. It actually went till 1099. There was this pope that you see on the left, Pope Urban II, okay? And one day, Urban gets a letter from the city of Constantinople asking for help against Muslim, not really invaders, but Muslims starting to expand. Now, Urban thought this was going to be quite a good idea. So in 1095, he gives one of perhaps the greatest speeches of all time. And we mean great. I don't necessarily mean it was great because of what happened was great. What I mean is that it was the most influential speech that perhaps ever happened in history. He gave it in Clermont, France, in which he had a large assembly of nobles and other commoners, and he urged them to take up arms, to travel to the Holy Land, to take it back from the Muslims. And that main target being the city of Jerusalem that had been conquered, 400 years prior. And what was so crucial about here was that Europe at that time, as we talked about in the other day, was that you have a area that is very fractious, that the people are very much against each other. And so, for instance, if like an English king said that he wanted to go on a crusade, nobody else would have gone with him. It was only the Pope, which we understand now, and his power in Europe, that was absolute at the time, could have made this happen. Now, Urban has three basic goals. One, he sees that the Europeans going on a crusade could be a way to unify the people so they would stop fighting so much. That really didn't work. Two, there's a religious aspect of it. Of course, Jerusalem is where Jesus died. The Holy Land was sacred to them. So here is an opportunity for them to take that back for Christendom. And then you have economic advantages here. The Holy Land of like modern day Israel, Lebanon, Syria, stuff like that, was an area with tremendous amounts of wealth. That there was a lot of trade that went through there, and it would help increase the overall economy of Europe. And when you put all those things together, his influence was massively huge here, and the Crusades don't happen, without him. So you can either like him or a number of people don't. Now, if you look at this map here, you can see basically you have a variety of different European groups that are assembling from these areas here. Germans, Hungarians. They were actually led by a Frenchman by the name of Godfrey de Bouillon. You do not need to know that. But as you can see, they work their way through here. They get to Constantinople. It takes them 2 years to get there. Then they start battles in Edessa and Antioch, and then eventually in 1099 they arrive at Jerusalem. Now, in Jerusalem, it was absolutely brutal. They are going to be able to take the city, but they take it with almost unparalleled violence. As one Crusader leader said, kill them all, God will find his own. Meaning that it wasn't really their job to figure out if the people in Jerusalem were Christian or if they were Jewish or Muslim, which they all kind of were, but that you kill all of them and some will go to heaven and some won't, so don't worry about it. It was absolutely brutal and devastating, and it was said that the streets ran with blood up to people's ankles. Now, after they take the Holy Land over, what they're going to do is set up this area called Outremer. And if you see this map over here, all these areas, so you have the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, Armenian Silesia, and the County of Edessa. These were all states that were set up by the Crusaders. Now, the reason I have there under that doomed is that they were tremendously far away from Europe. And if you see here, you have a sultanate, you have Muslim empires up here, you have Muslim empires up here, you have Muslim empires over here. So they're actually surrounded by enemies. And in the end, Jerusalem and the the Outremer kingdoms will only really last for, a century or so, because they're just so far away and they're in trouble. And it is because of their location that you actually get the Second Crusade. So we're going to keep going. And in the Second Crusade, basically what happened, the county of Edessa, which I just showed you on the map, falls. And so the Europeans are going to come to try to get it back. And as you can see by these pictures here, see the one girl getting her head stepped on, and the biker about to do a face plant that's really going to hurt. It is a complete and utter failure. They achieve nothing. They lose Edessa, and the Europeans are really just set up for trouble. And that trouble really comes in the form of a man by the name of Saladin. Saladin was originally from Egypt, and he becomes to be the greatest of the sultans of the Middle Ages. And his plan basically is to take over all of the Holy Land back for Islam, and he does that eventually in the late 1100s, peaking with him taking over Jerusalem. And to give you an idea here, you have some music in the background, but this is from a movie, Kingdom of Heaven. And warfare at this time in the Middle Ages was absolutely brutal. Of course, we have an ad here. We'll get rid of that. But what you see here are these things right there. They are called trebuchets that hurl giant rocks and fireballs. They actually set these things full of tar, these balls full of tar, light them on fire, and then shoot them at city walls. And they have these big siege towers, as you see these guys lit, fired. That's never fun. But it was absolutely brutal. Jerusalem held out really for as long as it could. As you see there, Orlando Bloom kind of tearing it up there. A little bit different. He's not an elf at that point. Trying to desperately hold the city against the Muslim invaders. But it was just a battle that they were destined to lose. And you see here a siege tower falls down, which was all well and good for a little while, and the Crusaders felt like, hey, we got a chance here, but then just those trebuchets just battering the walls over and over again until they were left in a final stand, and eventually they will be destroyed. Now, that will then lead to the final crusade, well, the final major crusade that I'm going to talk about, which is the Third Crusade, which was really the last attempt to get Jerusalem back. And it was led by three nations, France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire. France had a relatively small part. The English were led by King Richard II. He is the guy right here. There's King Richard. And the Holy Roman Empire would be led by King Frederick Barbarossa, this guy over here. These were two beloved kings in all of Europe, and they were really great military guys, and everybody thought everything was going to work out well, that this was the group that was going to get it done. But unfortunately, they were kind of doomed before they go there. The biggest thing was, while they were in Turkey, Frederick Barbarossa, for some bizarre reason, instead of walking over a bridge over a river, the bridge got really crowded, so he decided to try to walk across it in his armor, and he slipped and fell, and an suit of armor can weigh 100 pounds, and he drowned. Well, when he drowned, the Germans were like, well, our leader's gone, so they left. The French didn't really do much, and everything was left for Richard. Now, Richard will have some success. He will beat Saladin on a couple of occasions, and him and Saladin will actually meet on a number of occasions. And what ends up happening is that he eventually gets to the gates of Jerusalem, but he realizes that he'll never be able to actually take the whole city. And even if he took it, it's just a matter of time before the Muslims will take it back. So they kind of cut a deal with each other, and Israel and Jerusalem would be open for Christians to go on pilgrimage there, but then they would just leave. Now, there would be other crusades in the future. There will be another, Crusades 4 through 9, and as you see the guy there running into the steeplechase, they're all just complete, utter failures. The fact of the matter is the Muslim empires that they were invading were better funded, they had better technology, and they had better armies. And the Europeans were traveling to them, which put them at a distinct disadvantage. And when you put those things together, again, They're far away, they don't have as good technology, and they don't have as good military tactics. The Europeans are destined to failure. The last major crusade was done by King Louis IX of France in the 1200s. King Louis IX actually would eventually become a saint, and he also would die of disease on the crusade, and thus the Crusades would end. Now, the Crusades had some pretty impressive outcomes, if you will. There were some positives that were very, very good for the Europeans. First and foremost, it reignited trade. The Europeans realized how much stuff was there. And so, what they will start to do is trade with the Muslims. And trade will better the economy. And what they will also start to get from the Muslims through trade is knowledge. A lot of that knowledge that was lost in the Dark Ages, but that was created by Greece and Rome, the Muslims then actually made that better, particularly in medicine, and then it would all get eventually back to Europe, which would spark the Renaissance, which we'll talk about later. So, an economic benefit and a knowledge benefit. The biggest negative still impacts us today. The Crusades were brutal. Like in the United States of America, Crusades have like a good connotation. Like we have two schools in South Jersey, Bishop Eustace and Delsey. They're the Crusaders. We see them as these great white knights and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is the Crusaders in general were quite brutal. I'm not saying that they didn't go to these places for religious reasons because they wanted to make, their holy land free, but they killed lots of people. If you use the words a crusade in, say, a Muslim nation, it's a very negative thing. The connotation is a conqueror coming that will kill you, and thousands upon thousands of Muslim civilians were killed by these crusaders. And as a result, because the Muslims were looked down on so negatively, today stereotypes against Muslims and hatred and mistrust is really present in both Europe and the United States of America. Now you can take some of the terrorism issues that we've had and things like that, and you need to understand that this is the basis of this, is that many people in the United States and in Europe only have the connotations of the Muslims as these guys who conquered the Holy Land and wouldn't give it back, and so they're bad. And that's been around for 1,000 years. So if you want to really know why Islamic nations and the West, the United States and Europe, have so many issues, it really goes back to these crusades, and that's important to understand. All right, so make sure you take your notes and write down comments and questions, and I will see you guys soon.